Howdy. It is Tuesday, yes, April 7th, and kind of back at it. Spent most of the morning screwing around with the semi. Dad wanted to haul corn, and spent most of the time getting the dash thing all straightened out that I started there at the end of last week. And then got things set up at the bin and got the truck loaded and everything checked out and sent him down the road. And now I'm hopefully getting ready to get back on the planter, get those gauge wheels and the caps on the opener discs so we can get this out of here, because I need to stick some seed over here. Had some more corn showed up this morning, but since the tractor is here, I can't get in there to put it onto the hay rack back here. So need to get the planter put back together enough that I can pull it out, and then rearrange some seed, and got plenty of other things to do. It rained a little bit, not a huge amount, but then it was cloudy all day yesterday and kind of damp and cold. And then it was super foggy earlier this morning, almost like it had rained. So I think things are still fairly damp. Want to get back and hit a few spots with some tillage, but I don't know if that's going to be today or not. But the next few days, the forecast is pretty good, I think, the last I knew at least. And some of the extended forecast stuff is pretty cold, so I don't know that I'm going to get super excited about planting Saturday, which is the first day that I can plant for crop insurance purposes. But we'll see kind of what the ground conditions are like and what the forecast looks like at that point, I guess, on exactly what the game plan is. Well, I think I got 6 rows on the corn planter all ready to go, other than I still need to check that the zero is in the right spot or set the zero on the depth to make sure that it's consistent on all of them. So I think I still have the wing wheels, 3 on this wing and 3 on this wing, that I need to shim the gauge wheels on those and replace the pins. That's why I didn't shim them before. So I think I'm going to pull this around by the shop and work on those this afternoon. It's about 3 o'clock now. Dad's took the second load to the ethanol plant, and I don't know if he'll be able to get a third one in today or not. Probably load the truck again, but he may not need my help for that. So I'm going to pull this around and have a few other things to work on the planter that I've got parts here now. I'm looking at switching the tractor that we used to pull the corn planter. However, the tractor that I was going to use only has a large 1000, and this is a small 1000 coupler on the pump that drives the fans for the seed blower stuff. So I got a used one bought and just arrived today, so I'm going to check that out and see if it'll work. I also got some molding, basically like automotive trim type stuff to try putting in between the dimples on the corn drums. Supposedly, if you kind of, so the latest cyclos, so this was a 955, which was the last model of the cyclos, but these are the single hole drums. So at some point they switched, or they at least made a drum that had an extra like blank dimple in between, but they're not very common and pretty expensive. However, the other trick you can do is just to put a strip of molding in there to sort of basically make an extra bump, so that the seed release wheel goes more straight across instead of going up and down across each mountain. So I'm going to try sort of doing one drum and see how it acts, or with this planter we can easily turn the gauge wheel up there by hand and just kind of see how it feels like it turns. Dad is not a huge believer, so he thought that it was done that I was spending money on this, so we're going to do an A/B and see how it actually acts and kind of go from there. And there's a few other things that I need to kind of look over and adjust and check on here too, but nothing too serious. I think the main maintenance was just getting those openers replaced, and then doing the pins for the gauge wheels and getting everything shimmed back right, and just about have that whipped. So probably most of the rest of the stuff won't be too significant. I do need to work on markers. That's one of the biggest shortcomings of these planters, in my opinion, especially for no-till, is that the markers are not built very heavy. And I had a few mishaps a couple years ago that we sort of heated and bent and welded to try to get straightened back out. But the big problem is that, especially, so you have one marker that's spaced off of the toolbar and one that's pretty close. And the one that's spaced off is bent back enough that it gets into the what should be the rear one. So you have to be really careful when you fold and unfold that you don't catch anything on this marker, on that chain, or on the other marker, because you can kind of tear things up if you're not careful. So I need to kind of look things over and try to figure out if I'm gonna see if I can bend something or heat and bend to get some more clearance there, or I might be able to put spacer washers to kind of cheat how the tube attaches to the hinge points, or the hinge point up here possibly. Or if I'm going to totally replace that piece of 2x4 inch or 2x3 inch tubing and re-weld it from scratch and see if I can do better. I'm not 100% sure yet. Might depend a little bit on how things play out time-wise also, but that's basically what we've got going on. Right now I'm going to pull this around to the shed and then probably put that pallet of seed up on the hay rack here. It is drying off pretty decent this afternoon, or the sun's shining really nicely and there's a pretty good breeze. So I think I probably am going to be able to hit some of those tile ditches again here later today. But probably we'll wait until more dusk here in 2 or 3 hours, and then try to hit a few spots and maybe get the field cultivator hooked up tomorrow and kind of do a finish pass on the terraces, so that hopefully everything is kind of ready to go, and then we can use that tractor on the planter without having to switch things around during planting season. At least that's the hope. All right, we got the planter all set up here, unfolded in front of the shop, and unfolded without the markers catching this time, so that was lucky. But decided to go ahead, and I'm going to do probably 3 of these at least, and then maybe take a break and switch the seat around and stuff. But I was going to pull these pins out, and I don't know if you caught it when I was doing this stuff last week, but not really a place to put a wrench on there. It's round, and that also gets recessed back inside the row unit. I don't know if that's actually showing up. There we go. So that larger area gets recessed back in, so you can't even grab it with a pipe wrench or something. You maybe could use a pipe wrench on the very end, but you wouldn't want to use a pipe wrench like in that middle area where the arm pivots, because you'd booger up the surface. So how do you get those out? Well, if it's an orientation, well, this one's going to be easy. Most of them should be tight enough that you can't turn them by hand, but the procedure that we use, I guess, or that I used last week, and I'm going to use for these last 6 rows today, is to stick a punch through, and then, sorry, I didn't get my hammer over here, and then basically you can hit the punch to break them loose, and this is really a poor example because it was finger tight anyway, but some of them you have to beat on pretty good. And the other problem that you can't have is that if it's in the wrong spot, there's like no way to get a punch on there where you can hit on it, because, like, I mean, if this was tight in this spot, you couldn't hammer the punch up there and you couldn't get onto it unless you took the row cleaner off, which you can, but it's kind of a pain. So in those cases, I've got a shorter punch that will clear underneath the frame of the row unit, so you don't have as much leverage when you hammer on it, but it had been working pretty well when I switched out those ones in the center section. So then once we get that out, then we'll put the new pin in. I have been kind of trying to clean some of the gunk out of there. I should probably use an air compressor since I'm near one again now. We'll call that good enough. But then we'll just put this in, thread it in finger tight, maybe. I don't know, the threads on these are a little bit weird because it seems like they start out hard, and then once you get about 2 or 3 turns in, they get easy again, which is abnormal. And this one may make a liar out of me. As far as I could tell, there was no Loctite or anything on these, so I haven't been putting anything on, but I have been kind of trying to make sure that I got a little bit more rotation out of it with the hammer and the punch once I got it started all the way in, where that ridge made contact with the casting on the row unit. So once we're here, then try to do this one-handed without So we got, that's maybe an eighth of a turn or a little bit less. So hopefully that'll be tight enough that it won't let it work its way back out. So then we'll adjust the shims so that the tire is kind of just touching the blades on the row unit. We don't want a lot of contact because that'll cause the inside edge of the tires to wear. But we want them tight enough that dirt can't come up behind, or mud especially, if we end up, going through a wet spot or having moisture on the top or something like that. Just to kind of try to keep the dirt underneath and get a consistent depth on everything. And there's just washers that you use. There's 2 or 3 different thicknesses. Mostly this is a thick, thin, thick. But you can adjust how many washers are on the inside and the outside so that the arm can't move back and forth, and also to get that tire in the right spot in relation to the disc. So that's kind of what I'm going through and doing. I'll get all the pins switched out and then go through and shim all the gauge wheels and put everything back together. I did 12 of those gauge wheel pins last week using those punches, no problem. Broke them both in a time frame of about 5 minutes. I don't know if it just that lucky, I guess, or if I was trying to get them tighter today than I was last week. I do have another one that's just like this, so I'm going to gently use it. I got 5 of the 6 on these 3 rows on the left wing done, and this one is stuck. I warmed it up a little bit with a propane torch. My suspicion is that it may have been loose pre-season, and I took it out and Loctited it in and used a bunch of Loctite. So it should be blue Loctite if it's Loctited, which will release with heat, or should release with heat. So I think I'm going to get the torch pulled out here and get the pin warmed up real good, and then kind of let it cool, and hopefully it'll come out then. But that's kind of the next step here, I guess. I've got the other wing I haven't done anything with yet, so I need to get it pulled apart as well. But I think the sun is actually maybe a little warmer than ideal, I'm sorry to say. So I think I might take a little bit of a break from this and go rearrange some stuff and get that seed pallet up on the hay rack in the shed, and then revisit this in another half hour or so, hopefully after that pin is cooled. Well, I changed my mind. I ended up heating up the pin and got it broke loose. It's laying over here. This guy, tell by the giant gnashes from the pipe wrench, but I couldn't tell if there was really any sign of having Loctite on it, so it seems like it was just super tight from the factory. Until it is kind of like has rubbed a little bit, like the first little bit coming out there on that inside edge. I don't know if it'll show up on the camera or not. But anyway, once I got it heated up and put some grunt on the pipe wrench, I got it broken loose and then took a little bit of a break and let that cool down. Got everything put back together on this wing, and I did get the bolt out of the PTO coupler on the fan pump, but I think I'm going to have to get a gear puller set up on there. The shaft down inside, it's a tapered shaft with a key, because like this whole thing is going to hang off the PTO shaft on the back of the tractor, so you want everything really like secure and tight so that things don't flop around. And as far as I know, this has never been off of here. I got the nut off the inside, but there is like the end of the shaft on the pump has a kind of a recessed area where you can put a gear puller tip into. So I think I'm going to have to find a puller that I can hopefully, that has small enough jaws I can get under there and long enough to get around, and then be able to put some pressure on that, and should be able to tap it a little bit with a hammer and it'll probably pop right off. But in the short term, I think I'm going to go get the seed put on the hay rack. Dad went over to work down some dirt piles, I guess you would say. Had a farm that he bought that had a pond on it that he took out, and all the stuff that they scooped out just kind of piled on the ground and letting it dry. So he was over there last week and hit it once and hitting it again today, and we'll see what the report is, how much more it's going to take before we plant. That farm's going to be soybeans this year, so we got a little bit of time to get that all figured out. Yeah, I think it's time to get that pallet up there, so I'm going to move the pickup and then get that set up on the hay rack. And then I don't know if I'll do it today necessarily, but need to get the seed all sorted out because there's 2 different hybrids on the pallet that's on the tractor there, and 2 or 3 hybrids on this pallet, and 3 hybrids I think on that front pallet. I believe this was like an old Army forklift that Dad bought the mast out of a salvage yard years ago and then made the brackets to make it a 3-point. It doesn't lift very high, it doesn't have very long forks, but it has paid for itself many times over because there's not very much money in it, and serves the purpose fine for no more than we need a forklift most of the time, I guess. So anyway, it is very handy to have the hydraulic center link on this because that allows you to tilt the forklift up and down, but just runs off of tractor hydraulics. So just the levers in the cab. The other disadvantage, I don't know if it'll be very easy to see up here or not, but because you're staring through, I'll let the dust cloud settle here before I open the back window, but because you're looking through all of the forklift mast and 3-point stuff, it's pretty difficult to actually see the tips of the fork, so you about need a second person to tell you where you're at, or else get in and out several times or crane your neck around. But it does work. So we'll just pick the 3-point up a little bit here, hopefully. And tilt forward. We have a really heavy load on there. The cylinder isn't strong enough to tilt, but this isn't too bad. And then we'll hit the lever and raise up a little bit here. And I do need to pull some stuff off of that hay rack before I set this on, so I'm probably going to turn the camera off here. But that's pretty much the machine. The seal on the top side of the cylinder, on the bottom side of the ram, I guess you would say, I think is not necessarily 100% sealed, because there does seem to be some oil on the top side of that will come out that vent tube when you raise up high like I just did. But I think I'm about the height of the hay rack now, so I'll maybe put the camera down and get this up there and use my hands to do useful things. It's about 7:45 right now, and there's a nice little sunset in the west there. I ended up working down tile ditches this afternoon, probably for a couple hours or so. Could have been a little drier in some spots, but I think we made progress. Probably gonna have to hit some again with the disc, and then field cultivate over the new terraces to kind of get that all smoothed up and leveled up well. But I was just doing the last wing here for the pins on the gauge wheels, and got the pins all in and just need to shim the gauge wheels and get them put back on. But I was afraid that if I waited too much longer, it was going to be dark and nothing would show up on the camera. So I think everything went pretty smoothly on these. After I broke those punches on the other side, I started kind of just using the pipe wrench to take the pins out, because for the ones that are coming out, it doesn't really matter if they get mangled. So everything came out okay, new ones went in okay. Just need to get those gauge wheels put back on and shimmed up to the openers and put the pins in, and should be good to put this in the shed. Have a few more things to work on it tomorrow for sure, but at least we got the row units more or less ready to go, so slowly making progress.